Alright, it's about time I followed up on this, huh? Dedede is such an interesting character, right? When you look at the platforming antagonist of the early days, what do you see? Just long-standing obstacles for our heroes to overcome. Characters such as Bowser, Dr. Eggman, and Neo Cortex have all fought against Mario, Sonic, and Crash Bandicoot, respectively, for years. However, they also had those rare instances where they teamed up with their rival. And those are usually considered some of their best appearances. Usually. But after those, they're more or less back to their old nefarious ways. Dedede, on the other hand, is different. Different to the point where I don't think he was ever that bad a guy in the first place. Compared to other platforming rivals of the 90s, he made a pretty quick change. And yet, people still misinterpret him as a villain. Why do people still think of Dedede as a bad guy, despite everything? Is it because he's always possessed by greater evils? Are people still holding a grudge for a game that happened 30 years ago? Or is it the anime's fault?
Okay, it's definitely mostly that last thing, but let's not talk about that.
Not today. Right now, I'd just like to take a brief glance over Dedede's history in the mainline Kirby platformers, and see how he went from a fiend to a friend. In the debut title of the Kirby series, Kirby's Dream Land, King Dedede was an antagonist. He stole all the food in Dreamland and the sparkling stars, which, according to the game's manual, is like a power source for areas in Dreamland. So yeah, kinda rude of the king, but that's okay. Kirby's here, and standing for the peaceful times of Dreamland, they're gonna give the king a proper what for. Clean his clock, clobber— Oh, wait, is that not all that happens? While yes, there is a fight against Dedede, and he's sent flying after the fact, the important distinction here comes after the game's credits, particularly in the game's extra mode. There's this scene where Dedede falls into frame and Kirby follows after him. Dedede cries and sulks away, clearly showing regret over his actions, and Kirby follows after him. Now, what happens after that is largely up to interpretation, but judging by the context clues of what happens later in this series, here's my 2 cents. From this point on, after realizing what he's done and apologizing for it, Dedede tries to set out and be a better person for the land that he rules over. I mean, just read the expressions here. Not once does Kirby show anger in this scene. He cares about Dedede, and even if he did a bad thing, he'd want to comfort him when he's at his lowest point. And with Kirby's genuine sweet nature leaving an impression on him, I assume that's what started Dedede's switch to the good side. It's not a perfect transition. He still gets competitive, he has a hard time communicating with others, and he's pretty vulnerable to larger threats. But on the whole, as the series goes on, Dedede only continues to clean up his act. And it all started here. This one scene with no dialogue, only expressions. Kirby's pretty good at that, come to think of it. The next mainline game was Kirby's Adventure. And at first, the game sets up its plot as if Dedede's back to his old tricks. He stole the Star Rod from the Fountain of Dreams! It broke it into pieces! How could he? Kirby then spends the game collecting the pieces of the Star Rod to put it back where it belongs. Simple enough. But an 11th hour reveal shows that Dedede, in fact, was trying to protect Dreamland from the invading nightmare. Uh-oh. With a helping hand, or mouth, and the ending text, not mincing any words, it lets you know that even if things kinda went wrong this time, Dedede had good intentions here. He was making an honest first step towards being a better ruler. If only he communicated that just a little better. Maybe he just wanted to do a good deed without appearing to be seeking praise. Maybe he was anxious about telling someone. But either way, together Kirby and the King restore the Star Rod for good, and the world can dream a new dream for tomorrow. After Kirby's Adventure came the games that the fans call the Dark Matter Trilogy, consisting of Dreamland 2,
Yeah, that's fair!
3, and Kirby 64. When he's dangling on the edge, he has his little voice, and he's While there was a game or two between them, I'll be talking about the trilogy as a set here. The Dark Matter games all seem to put Dedede in a similar situation at first. A boss battle where you fight to beat the devil out of him. In Dreamland 2 and 3, these are the assumed final fights. Unless you 100% completed the game, and then the true final boss shows its face. Or eye. However, Kirby 64 goes a little further beyond enhancing Dedede's characterization. He's teasing like an older brother, snagging the crystal shard away from Kirby before he goes and gets possessed again. However, it's after the fight where things get more interesting, because unlike in the previous two Dark Matter games, we still have like 80% of the game to go. So what did they do with Dedede? Well, he joins your party as an ally. The Japanese website for the game states that he joins the quest to look after the gang. He's worried about them going alone. Wholesome. And once again, like an older brother figure. He's mainly just there in cutscenes, tagging along, getting up to hijinks. But in certain levels, he lets Kirby ride piggyback while he deals with bigger obstacles, which is just adorable. I wish they pushed things a little bit further with this team up, but it was the first big one, and either way it shows how far Dedede's come since the first game. Of course, while all these games were happening, there were also spin-off oh my god. There were also spin-off games where Dedede showed up. In most of them though, canon isn't really considered, and Dedede is still your endgame opponent. However, here the vibes are more that of a friendly rivalry that can sometimes get a little bit out of control. Wait, Dedede is a Tinkerer too? The one exception to this, I would say, is Kirby Battle Royale on the 3DS, where he has an actively malicious motive? However, that game breaks so many conventions and rules of Kirby that I don't really think it's worth talking about in a video detailing Dedede's character growth. It's probably non-canon anyways. But yeah, in only the first 8 years of Dedede, he's already had some amazing developments. Where do we go from here? Unfortunately, not quite as green of pastures as before. The early 2000s were unfortunately a bit rough for Dedede. That's not to say he regressed or anything, not in canon anyway. It's just that for a while, the games were kinda Dedede light. Not necessarily a bad thing. If a story doesn't need him, then don't use him. But for this video, it creates a sort of awkward lull. He was absent in Amazing Mirror, and Squeak Squad dropped him after the first world. Spin-offs such as Air Ride and Canvas Curse did have him in larger amounts, but in these, he's very much a non-entity. Very little discussion substance here. He's as much of a boss as, say, Kracko. However, one little game brought everything back to the way it should be in 2008, and in turn prevented me from interrupting the flow when I was talking about the Dark Matter Trilogy. Let's talk about... In the original Kirby Superstar, there wasn't much new Dedede content. Spring Breeze, the first campaign of the 6, was a light remake of Kirby's Dream Land, without Kabula, the king's flying fortress. And Gourmet Race had about as much story substance as any other spin-off, with Dedede just wanting a friendly competition with the most iconic music in the series. However, then we come to one of the 4 new modes in Kirby Superstar Ultra. Revenge of the King. It's a reimagining of the Extra Mode campaign from Kirby's Dream Land, sorta like how Spring Breeze adapted the base game. There's a lot of things restored from the original Kirby's Dream Land that weren't really there in Spring Breeze. Hell, they even brought back Kabula and gave her a face. Neat. However, compared to Spring Breeze, they also take a lot more liberties here. For example, Dedede talks in this mode. In fact, I think this is the first time he's ever spoken in the games. And no, his screams don't count. It's all written by Shinya Kumazaki, the current director of Kirby. He truly understands what makes these characters who they are. Especially Dedede, he has such a nuance here. Sure, most of it is altered dialogue from Revenge of Meta Knight, another Superstar mode, but the important distinction about Revenge of the King is that Dedede just wants to settle his grudge against Kirby. There's very little actual ill will here. The way he states that he uses the mini-bosses to test Kirby confirms this. We also see a bit more of Dedede's kind side here, when he's talking to his subjects. When Bandana Waddle Dee doesn't want to fight Kirby alone, Dedede spares him, allowing him to leave if he wants, which parallels a similar scene in Revenge of Meta Knight. And the way Bandy ends up fighting him anyway, God, what loyalty. I love it.
Yeah, my babies! Those are my babies! What? You shush!
And of course, this all culminates in that final boss battle. I know I can't do a Dedede video without mentioning Masked Dedede. So there, I mentioned it. Okay, fine, I'll ramble. Once again borrowing some aesthetic choices from Meta Knight, Dedede tries his own masked grudge match against Kirby. A match in an electric cage. He even gives him a hammer to level the playing field a bit. Most series probably wouldn't play this all too seriously, considering how goofy it looks from the outset and how much it apes from another character. It would be played as a parody more than anything. And yet, from the music to the atmosphere of the abandoned arena contrasting the packed one in Spring Breeze, it's played 100% genuinely. And it goes hard. It's not the most difficult fight, but Dedede's desperation in this final match absolutely sells it. Far more than Dreamland's hard mode match. And after that, we get this lovely, bittersweet scene with the king, this time without dialogue. The only audio here is the credits song, The King and the Setting Sun, bringing the whole thing together. As this somber tune plays, Dedede roams through the desert with his Waddle Dees. He finally gives up on his more hostile nature, and even so, the Waddle Dees are still loyal to him. The battle may have been a loss, but it was a loss that Dedede learned from. Definitely a lot less up to interpretation than the original Dreamland stuff, huh? So what happened after that? After Kirby Superstar Ultra, Kirby fans only had to wait 3 years before the next mainline game, Kirby's Return to Dreamland. I don't have much to say about it when it comes to Dedede though, which is very funny, because I think it also has the most important point for Dedede. He's fully playable. Not just as an ally in a few levels or an alternate character locked in post-game. No, this is the first mainline game where Dedede is fully playable, from start to finish. It's just a shame that story-wise, he doesn't really have any standout character moments here. Next. Now this is more like it. Triple Deluxe is Dedede's Kirby game. I mean, it's right there in the title. Triple Deluxe, or Triple D, DDD. Anyway, Dedede is the damsel in distress this time, which makes his role go a little further than just simple mind control. He's a constant goal you're pursuing, rather than just being slapped on at the end. A minor detail, but one that really helps up the stakes. And Kirby's determination to save him once again really shows their kind-hearted nature. The game kinda goes as normal for Kirby from there. There's not much plot in the middle bit. But when we get to that endgame, the plot thickens ever further. See, Taranza, the little spider boy that kidnapped Dedede, mistook him for the hero of the lower world, wanting to capture him for his Queen Sectonia. And this mistake is honestly understandable. I mean, look at this little cute design. I could just poke his little cheeks. From this point though, Taranza puppeteers Dedede, and he has the mask again. Normally I'd find this kinda cool, but it is kind of a transparent fan service thing, huh? Okay, the axe is pretty raw though. However, it's what comes right after this fight that's the most important. And perhaps the most baffling thing is, almost every other Dedede video I've seen tends to skip over this. But like, the bond here. Kirby jumping up and down with a tired Dedede after they win against Queen Sectonia. And then Dedede helping in the second phase. Not just chucking Kirby into the arena, though he does kinda do that with the Sky People's cannon beforehand. But when push comes to shove, and Kirby is struggling to survive against Queen Sectonia's grasp, he bonks Kirby out of said grasp, and he and Taranza set up the Hypernova Fruit to kick the Queen's ass. The fact that the ending cutscene makes a big point about this only cements how important it was. the kingdom of Floralia would be in ruins had he not played his part. Triple Deluxe may not be one of my favorite Kirby games, but I would be remiss to not acknowledge how big a part Dedede plays in it. He even has his own little post-game campaign. I wish it wasn't non-canon, but it is there. And after Triple Deluxe came probably the most important step for Dedede's character in Kirby history. Dedede's Drum Dash Deluxe, baby! Oh yeah, peak fiction in motion. Okay, jokes aside, it's fine. I wish they made Dedede's first starring role something more fitting to his character, but it's a neat novelty that unfortunately you won't be able to buy anymore soon. I just wanted to mention it because I feel like otherwise somebody would have brought it up in the comments. But after Triple Deluxe and Drum Dash Deluxe, Planet Robobot and Star Allies more or less keep up his appearances, his characterization being consistent across the board. Even if he didn't really need to be in Robobot at all. I mean, he didn't do anything except get cloned by the girl boss employee of a racist man. However, Star Allies gives Dedede playable screen time yet again. But not before another possession.
Okay, hear me out though.
And just like in Triple Deluxe, he gets his own campaign. And it's non-canon again. However, the consistency of Dedede being an ally post-possession is very appreciated. So alright, Dedede's a friend now, all is well. But where do we go from here? And furthermore, can we push things any farther? And now we reach Kirby and the Forgotten Land, the newest game in the series. At least until that Dream Buffet game comes out, but I doubt that'll have anything amazing about Dedede's character in it. But you know what does have amazing Dedede characterization? This game, right here. I've said my piece about the first Dedede fight in my other Forgotten Land video, so I'll keep this part brief. You got all that? What, no? Fine, I'll do a bit more recap. While being separated from Kirby and the gang via Vortex, Dedede's mind was slowly taken over by the psychic powers of Fecto Forgo, the game's main villain. And throughout his fights against Kirby, you can feel Dedede trying to resist being controlled this time, whether it be symbolic in the music, or visual in his second encounter, where he's actively trying to resist the amplified control of the Beast Mass. These battles show a much more deranged behavior from Dedede, one that doesn't quite fit with his rounded out redesign, an intentional choice to make it register that this shouldn't be happening. However, this also marks the first time where it's visually shown that Dedede was resisting a possession or mind control. At least I think. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, the algorithm loves that. And of course, we can't have a discussion on Dedede here without that iconic scene that follows his final Forgo fight. The Waddle Dees rushing over to help him, and the happiness on his face to see Kirby again, that would have been enough to prove my point, but they go further beyond. The Beast Pack stampedes towards our heroes, realizing that the leader of the area has broken free. Kirby and the gang try to escape, but as a Waddle Dee trips, Dedede runs back to help him. And as he does so, he realizes something. It's all in that expression. The mix of compassion and unbridled fury in his eyes, as he realizes what all the beasts are doing to the people he cares about, and how he unwillingly took part in all of that. But no more. Dedede's broken free from his mind control, and now it's his turn to shine, his turn to smack the Beast Pack out of their control, all while protecting those he loves most. And so he stays behind, throwing the Waddle Dee to Kirby as the elevator closes behind him, thus completing Dedede's turn from Fiend to friend to savior. I know he's okay in the post game, but like, I'm sorry, can I just have a moment? But speaking of the post game, there's a lot there that emphasizes Kirby and Dedede's bond too. When you wave at him in Waddle Dee Town, he waves back. And he gives Kirby the blueprint for his hammers? Sure, the ability descriptions in previous games always said the hammer was on loan from the king, but hearing the honor turn from loan to gift, really says it all. And perhaps the most damning evidence of all, this figure description. Sure, he still calls himself Kirby's rival, but like, he was crestfallen when he couldn't find Kirby in the new world at first. They used a word I didn't even know the meaning of until this game to express how much Dedede freaking missed Kirby. The implication that he was searching all over for him in this world, and the reality setting in just before he was brainwashed again. Oh my heart. Yeah, dude, you're not rivals anymore. You're just found family at this point. It's absolutely crazy to me that through the hundreds of games I've played in my life, all the shows I've watched, and all the characters I've met, that King Dedede still remains as one of the most well-realized and developed characters I've ever seen. His arc through the core platformers really shows the power that an endlessly optimistic and caring protagonist can hold. Through one act of kindness, Dedede slowly but steadily made his way to be the person that his Waddle Dees always believed he was. And no matter how many people try to track that by pointing out his moments of weakness, the statement will always stand. To pull a quote from Forgotten Land, he's usually carefree, perhaps a teeny tiny bit lazy, but when it matters most, our leader always does his royal duty. Long live King Dedede. Wish the anime knew that instead of relying on the status quo!